This instrument of warfare is called the Macuahuitl, the revered obsidian-bladed club. The Macuahuitl, as most people have come to call this instrument due to systematic colonial miseducation by the useful idiots, most referred to as European and American scholars in academia, is an incorrect term for this very specific type of club. There is, many different versions of this type of blade-arrayed war club other than the obsidian-bladed variant. Others being the Teypohs'weepeehl, which is the copper-bladed club, the Teypohs'weepeehl, which is the flint-bladed club, and the Macuahuitl, the revered feather-bladed war club. As misunderstood and unknown is the name of this instrument, so is the true history and the original purpose for this weapon, which dates back to antediluvian prehistory, far before the current composition of land masses you are familiar with today, referred to as Europe, the Americas, Asia, Africa, etc. In our oral history, it is said the Macuahuitl, the obsidian-bladed war club, first came into fruition during the third age of Atl in the lands of Aztlan, after a race of giants called the Chichimeca had returned to the surface of the earth and began enslaving our people, to use as slaves, subjects, human cattle, miners to mine their gold and ore, builders to build their Teypohs'weepeehl or stone pyramids, as sacrificial offerings to be sacrificed by the tens of thousands annually at the senate of their Teypohs'weepeehl or stone pyramids, as breeders, as workers, as toilers, as farmers, as priests, as soldiers, as the slave plebeian servant Macuahuitl caste, by which they ruled over with ultimate authority as self-proclaimed gods. It is said in this age there were two twin brothers whom were sons of Teypohs'weepeehl, red scalp-lock, whose names were Anquitontzin, little hunter, and Ocelotontzin, little jaguar, whom resisted colonization and led our people in the fight against the Chichimeca giants. It is said these twin brothers made and carried the first Macuahuitl for the purpose of hacking at the back of the knee or at the back of the exposed Achilles tendon of the giants, where there was exposed flesh that their bronze armor greaves did not cover, which was said to drop a giant to one knee. It is said the giants were clumsy and, when left with only the use of one leg, became susceptible to falling and vulnerable to spear and long dart attacks to the throat or eyes. It was the elite vanguard sash carrier warrior societies, like that of the original Coachique, the Chicahuacyoloque, the Oceloque, the Xiocoyoque, and the Cuaoque, whom were tasked and oath to carry the Macuahuitl, the obsidian-bladed war club, and expected to drop a giant to his knee in battle so that the Tlajochque or the Topilque, the dart throwers or spearmen, could finish them. It is said after our people lost this war generations later and were enslaved and colonized by the Chichimeca in that same third age, that out of respect for the surviving members of our sash carrier warrior societies whom put up such a fight against them, these warrior societies were conscripted into the giants' army, becoming the military noble class, similar to the conquered and enslaved indigenous Ainu samurai warriors of pre-dynastic Japan, whom later became the military nobility of dynastic Japan after their colonization. Now that you know the true name and history of this instrument, let me show you how my beloved Wesisintli taught me how to make our clan's variant of the sacred Macuahuitl. One begins this process by harvesting a branch no smaller than the diameter of one's own thigh of either Teypohs'weepeehl, Osage orange tree, or Macuahuitl, or a mesquite tree, to form the club. One then shapes the wood into the desired shape using the matlahueli, the machete, or the tatejoni, the tomahawk, and the xaltetzintli, sandstone for sandpaper. Next, one carves out or digs out the slots by which the obsidian blades will be inserted into. Traditionally, this was done with an obsidian or quartz-tipped hand drill. Then one needs to find and gather a large chunk of itzintli, or volcanic glass, the Chichimeca, the horn of the elk, is used to break pieces of the obsidian into smaller shards. Those smaller shards are then napped and shaped and formed with what we call Macuahuitl, the deer antlers of a small white-tailed deer. After one's blades have been fashioned, one now needs to make the Teypohs'weepeehl, the pine resin glue, which will secure one's blades into one's wooden handle. One does this by gathering the droppings of the rabbit, of the elk, of the deer, and then gathering the pine sap from the Teypohs'weepeehl, or the juniper, or pine-rich or sap-rich trees. One never gathers chopali from the tree itself, as this is taboo. One always gathers chopali from the ground around the tree, so that one doesn't harm the tree. An important understanding for one who wishes to have an Itz Macuahuitl with good medicine. One then needs to take the gathered chopali, the juniper pine resin, and then with a hammerstone, or what one has to use, crush into a Teypohs'weepeehl, or a pine resin powder. The finer the better. And then one needs to take this powder and put it into a container which will be able to be put into a fire for melting. Then the same process is done to the deer, rabbit, or elk droppings, pounded into a fine powder and then put into the same container and mixed. This container is then held over an open fire or slowly melted and mixed over the coals of a once warm or hot fire. You want to mix this until the consistency is of a thick liquid similar to molasses. Teypohs'weepeehl must be used hot, so as soon as it is finished, one must then quickly pour into the slots and place into the abscesses one's obsidian blades. Pine resin glue cools and hardens very quickly, so one must work very fast to accomplish this. This part of the process is very difficult and takes much patience, and sometimes one will have to redo this process multiple times, as the Teypohs'weepeehl, the resin glue, sometimes will dry too fast, and one will have to dig out all of the pine resin glue and then re-pour and re-begin. After one has inserted and fastened with the Teypohs'weepehl all of one's blades, one will need to begin gathering the Macuahuitl, or red ochre, which one will then have to spend time crushing into a fine powder, which we refer to as Teypohs'weepehl. Now, this Teypohs'weepehl, this red ochre pigment powder, will then be mixed with what we call Macuahuitl, which is deerskin glue. Deerskin glue is made by taking the bones, the tendons, and the skin of the sacred deer and boiling it until the water has become a thick, syrupy consistency. Now, this thick, syrupy consistency one is left with is what is the Macuahuitl, or the deerskin or hide glue. Once one's Itz Macuahuitl has been painted, it must rest for 2 days. Then the handle wrap is made from the skin of the Teypohs'weepeehl, the sacred or esteemed offering priest deer that you may know as the pronghorn. This skin that is used is usually made from rawhide, from ehuach, which is the skin that has been deferred and stretched and dried. It is reconstituted in water overnight and then cut to size. And then Chichimeca or ichmechet, cotton cordage or agave fiber cordage, is ran through and coated with Macuahuitl, beeswax. And then one sews up this sleeve around the wooden handle while it is still wet. This is left to dry for a full day. As the Teypohs'weepeehl, as the pronghorn skin dries, it becomes solid and rock hard and joined to the handle of the Itz Macuahuitl. Next, I begin the long and arduous process of the copper work that will adorn the Macuahuitl. This was a custom that defined many Second Age lineage clans, was their use of copper work in their Yaotlachitl and in their instruments and in their adornment. A long and arduous process. Next, you see me beginning to make the Chichiltich Teypohs'weepeehl, or the copper nails that will secure my copper ornaments and talisman to the wooden body of my Macuahuitl. Traditionally, the copper wire from which one made one's Chichiltich Teypohs'weepeehl, or copper nails from, first had to be casted using a resin and beeswax, lost wax method, which is an even longer process, which I did not have to do. This is how my clan's version of the Macuahuitl, or the obsidian blade arrayed war club, was made.